Hello and welcome to Mystical Tutor. These are a series of 5 to 15-minute classes designed to help improve your knowledge of the rules and policies of the Magic the Gathering Judge program. This lesson will cover the decisions a player makes while casting a spell. This includes announcing the spell, choosing modes, choosing targets, and distribution. The first step in casting a spell is choosing the spell you want to cast and announcing it. You then take the spell from where it was and put it on the stack. Most cards are cast from the hand, but some can be cast from different zones. Some cards, like Hacken Stromgald Scourge, or cards with flashback, like Think Twice, can be cast from the graveyard. Other cards, like Diluvian Primordial and Carador Ghost Chieftain, let you cast other cards from your graveyard. Since the first thing you do when you cast a spell is move it to the stack, these cards can't be removed from the graveyard by something like Scavenging Ooze to prevent them from being cast. Beyond the graveyard, you can cast cards from exile like Misthollow Griffin, or cards with rebound. Sometimes you can cast cards from your library, either on top of it, like Unexpected Results, or from within it, like Panglacial Worm. The zone you cast a card from can matter. Rebound checks to see if you cast it from your hand, so it doesn't occur every turn. And Phage the Untouchable wants to know if you should lose the game or not. There are also casting restrictions. Some limit when you can cast the spell, and others limit what zone you can cast cards from. The most common is the difference between instance and non-instance, but you also have cards like Berserk, which can only be cast during certain steps. Other cards, like Grafdigger's Cage, Iona Shield of Emeria, and Rule of Law, create restrictions that can limit how players cast spells. Finally, there are cards like Panglacial Worm or Rout, which let you cast the spell when you normally wouldn't be allowed to. The worm lets you cast the spell in the middle of resolving another spell. Now that we've announced the spell, we get to choose modes. This covers modal spells, splicing, alternative, additional, and variable cost, as well as hybrid and Phyrexian mana. Modal spells are easy to recognize. They say choose one or sometimes choose two. When you cast a spell that wants you to choose what to do, you choose now. Some abilities like Entwine let you choose both options. You also make decisions such as casting Breaking Wave as an instant at this point. Despite having already announced the spell, you still need to clarify to the rules that you're casting it differently than normal. Splice onto Arcane also happens at this point. You reveal the card that you are splicing, such as Through the Breach, which stays revealed through the rest of the casting process. However, the splice card is still in your hand. You also choose alternative cost. These include keywords like Evoke or Flashback, and non-keywords such as Force of Will or Fury of the Horde. You can only choose one alternative cost. For example, if you cast Snapcaster Mage and target Force of Will, you can't flashback the Force of Will by paying the alternative cost of exiling a blue card and losing one life. Unlike alternative cost, you can apply as many additional costs to a spell as you want. If a spell has both kicker and buyback, you can pay for both. Some cards have non-keyword additional cost, like Silmagar Scourge or Momentous Fall. You also choose how you're paying for hybrid or Phyrexian mana symbols at this point. While you decide for cards like Deathrite Shaman, Spectral Procession, or Dismember now, you don't pay these costs yet. None of these decisions change the converted mana cost of the spell. The converted mana cost is always the mana cost in the top right corner. However, some spells have X in their mana cost. X can be 0 or any positive integer, though some of those spells have restrictions, such as Mind Grind. While on the stack, the value of X does change the converted mana cost to the total. If you were to choose X equals 1 for Genesis Wave, the converted mana cost would be 4. If you chose X equals 1 for Chalice of the Void, Since it has X in the mana cost twice, the converted mana cost would be 2. There is a tournament shortcut that says if you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, and you don't specify what X is, then you're intending to spend all of the mana in your mana pool on that spell. After that batch of decisions, you now get to choose targets. We've waited this long because a different choice on a modal spell can change the number of targets we have. For example, with Cryptic Command, you can have 0, 1, or 2 targets, depending on the modes chosen. You have to be able to target the proper number of targets in order to continue casting a spell. If a spell says another target, such as Incremental Growth, or specifies a number of targets, such as Reap What Is Sown, you must choose different targets for each of these. If the word target is used multiple times, you can choose the same target multiple times. Seeds of Strength and Dromoka's Command let you choose the same target again, but you don't have to. If the spell says any number of targets, such as a spell with Strive, you make this decision now. If you're casting an aura, you choose the target that it will be attached to on resolution. Like in combat, there can be restrictions and requirements. Some creatures require spells that can target them to actually target them, like Standard Bear, while other creatures can't be targeted because of hexproof or similar abilities. Again, when you cast a spell, you must obey as many of these requirements as possible without violating any restrictions. At this point, Become the Target abilities, such as Heroic on a Crowan Crusader or Precursor Golem, trigger at this point, but they don't actually go on the stack until we finish casting the spell. Finally, you get to distribute any effects that the spell has. Cards like Electrolyze and Rolling Thunder allow you to distribute damage, while cards like Obscene Charm and Blessing of Nature allow you to distribute +1/+1 counters. You can only distribute to targets you chose previously, and you must distribute at least one to each chosen target. Let's consider an example. We're going to cast Aurelia's Fury, and our opponent controls 2 Phantasmal Bears, a Grizzly Bears, and an Invisible Stalker. First, you announce that you're going to cast Aurelia's Fury, and you move it to the stack. The only mode that you have to choose is the value of X. For this example, we'll choose X equals 5 for maximum value. Now, we get to choose targets. We cannot target the Invisible Stalker because it has hexproof, but we can target each of the bears and our opponent. Both of the Phantasmal Bears will trigger, but those don't go on the stack until after we're done. Now that we've chosen our targets, we have 5 damage to distribute. We assign 1 to each of the Phantasmal Bears, 2 to the Grizzly Bears, and 1 to our opponent. Once we've done all this, all we have to do now is pay for the spell. But for now, we'll just charge it to our account. This concludes this lesson on the decisions made to cast a spell. Join us next week when we go more in depth on paying for spells. For additional lessons, visit Mystical Tutor online at mysticaltutor.org.